have to ask you to take your seat and let's come to order. Walk into the room and everybody's just on their best behavior. If only you can teach my kids that, I'd really, really appreciate it. My apologies for being a little bit late. We have won't get into details, but a intense in a good way Senate Democratic Caucus lunch that ran a little bit late. And then Senator Schumer asked that I join him for the press briefing post our caucus lunch because of the emphasis on the State of the Union last night. And this is a transition, this is not a tangent. Talked about my Spanish language response to the State of the Union, where whether the president brought it up or not, I was going to speak towards the threat to elections and our greater democracy. And for better and for worse, the president surely did bring it up in his State of the Union. It's been really long ago past the part where they're saying the quiet part out loud. When he uses language like he wants to take over the elections on the tail end of years and years of the big lie, months and months of their effort to weaponize not just the Department of Justice anymore, but the Department of Homeland Security to obtain the voter files and the personal information of voters in every state in the nation. We know the threat is real. We know that the executive order effort that he attempted last year to control how we do elections was ruled unlawful, but they followed that up with legislation, making it harder for eligible Americans to register to vote, to stay registered to vote, to be able to cast their ballot. The House passed the most recent version of, I forget if it's the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, the name keeps changing, and now there's conversations amongst the Senate Republican caucus as to when, not if, but when and how to consider those measures. It is not a voter ID bill. It is very much a voter suppression bill. It is very much a voter purge bill and has so much more in that piece of legislation that should concern people. And so, sadly, today's topic couldn't be more timely. And I just want to welcome all of you. Thank you for your patience in waiting for my arrival. We do expect a good number of my colleagues to participate, flooding in and out throughout the forum here today. And I think the last thing I'll mention as I introduce and recognize the witnesses for your brief testimony and looking forward to our conversation is it's a sad day when we have to do this on our own. These issues are so heady that this should be a formal and full Rules Committee hearing. The chair of the Rules Committee, Mitch McConnell, has been outspoken, and continues to be, by the way, on his disagreement that the federal government should get involved with elections administration, including an op-ed he published in the Wall Street Journal just last year. But that belief seems to be fading on the Republican side of the aisle, again, making conversations like today that much more important, not just timely. So even if just Democrats have to band together to make sure we're putting a spotlight on this challenge, on this concern for our country and for the American people, then we'll continue to do just that and keep the spotlight on and the heat on to remind us we should be working to make it easier for eligible people to register and vote, not the opposite. So with that, let me introduce our witnesses briefly. First, we are going to have Commissioner Mo Ivory from the state of Georgia. Mo Ivory represents District 4 in Fulton County, which has been in the news recently. In addition to responsibilities to the county, Commissioner Ivory is a law professor at Georgia State University and previously served in private practice and as in-house counsel. Thank you for being here. Next is my friend, California Attorney General Rob Bonta. Prior to his current role, Attorney General Bonta served for 8 years in the California State Assembly, and before that as Deputy City Attorney for the City and County of San Francisco. We also have Ambassador Norm Eisen, founder of Democracy Defenders and Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution and Executive Chair of the States United Democracy Center. He's also served on the House Judiciary Committee during President's first impeachment, and as special counsel and special assistant to the President under the Obama administration, and of course, as ambassador to the Czech Republic. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, we have Stephen Richer, Riker, remind me, I'm sorry?
Just like the word.
Richer, all right. How I wish I was. Former recorder of Maricopa County, Arizona, another county and jurisdiction that's been in the news for years and years now. He's a fellow at the Cato Institute and CEO of Republic Affairs. Before his work as an election official, he served as a business transactions attorney and worked at several public policy think tanks. So thank you for being here. Let's jump right into it. Commissioner Ivory.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Padilla. My name is Mo Ivory, and I am a county commissioner in Fulton County, Georgia. I want to thank you all for having me here this afternoon to speak to such an important moment in our nation's history, the root of which takes place in my home, the most populous county in a state that has the power to propel our country into a future of equity, compassion, and honor. I also want to thank my family, whose love, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in me has made this moment possible. I am especially proud to stand here as the granddaughter of Lupita Rodriguez. At the time of her death at 110 years old, she was the longest living Mexican national in the United States, whose resilience and strength continue to guide me. I am honored to serve as the first Afro-Latina commissioner in Fulton County, and I'm deeply proud to be here today before the Senate Rules Committee, humbled and inspired by the history of my family and the enduring legacy that has led me to this moment. As you all have seen, on January 28, 2026, the Fulton County Elections Office was raided by the FBI, and 656 boxes of ballots, absentee ballot envelopes, recap sheets, and results tapes from the 2020 election were seized with a criminal warrant. This was an unprecedented act that came directly from the Trump administration. In 2020, following historic turnout in the state of Georgia, Joe Biden won the presidency. Since that moment, we have seen every attempt imaginable by President Trump to undermine and take over our elections. First, a call was made to the Georgia Secretary of State to find 11,780 votes. Next, Fulton County election workers became national targets and received consistent threats to themselves and their families. The results were counted, recounted, hand-counted, and audited. Yet, 6 years later, we are still witnessing a president so unwilling to accept defeat that he will go to any lengths to silence the voters in this county. Fulton County is now in active litigation to get our documents back and contest the criminal warrant that was issued on an affidavit filled with 6 years of conspiracy theories and unfounded claims. But let me be clear, this fight does not end at the 656 boxes. What we are facing is a concerted national effort to undermine voter confidence and restrict access to the ballot box. It is now our job as leaders and experts to step up and prepare to work together to safeguard our democracy. The democratic process is fundamental, bedrock principle that our nation prides itself on. Any effort to erode that is embarrassingly despicable and reminiscent of the history of voting in the Jim Crow South. I represent a county of some of the most active participants in democracy. I will always stand my ground to protect them and protect our process. In 2025, the Fulton County Republican Party nominated 2 known election deniers to our Board of Registrations and Elections. It is up to us as commissioners to vote on whether those nominees should be appointed to the very body in charge of certifying our election results. When that vote came, I said no. The Fulton County GOP then filed a lawsuit against our board, and the court told us that it was our duty to approve their nominees. I believe that much like the choice we have at the ballot box, an elected official chosen by the people has the discretion to vote their conscience. So when that vote came before us again, I, along with one other commissioner, stayed in my seat and voted no, again. Following that vote, the Fulton GOP sought punishments such as jail time and $10,000 a day fines. That case is still in the appeals process. So when the day came that the FBI was knocking on our door, I was not surprised to see yet another tactic to interfere with free and fair elections in Fulton County. Fulton is not the end of it. After agents targeted our elections office, similar actions followed in Puerto Rico. That sequence matters. It shows that what happened in our country was not an isolated dispute, but a model. We are watching this unfold alongside increasingly explicit calls from Donald Trump and his allies to nationalize elections. Efforts to centralize control over elections and impose new federal restrictions, such as the SAVE Act, move us further away from our Constitution's promise that voting power rests with the people. Now, I would like to address President Trump directly. Our system was designed so that no one president and no single administration could control who votes or how votes are counted. Your attempts to challenge our constitutional framework via federal overreach are shameful. You will never be able to silence Fulton County voters, because I promise you this, the South got something to say. I am not just a Fulton County commissioner. I am an attorney, law professor, communicator, a wife, a mother, and a grandmother, and proudly a Georgia voter. That last title is a badge of honor in this country. I refuse to let anyone threaten that right. I promise to do everything in my power to ensure that elections in Fulton County, in Georgia, and in America remain free, fair, and protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Attorney General Bonta.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Let me say first, thank you, Senator Padilla, for your friendship, for your leadership, for how deeply and personally and professionally you care about this issue of voting rights throughout our nation. I know how much you have done on this issue from your time as Secretary of State, and thank you for continuing to be a champion, and thank you for using your authority to gather us today and convene us for this very important discussion. Let me start with something fundamental. Democracy only works if people are free to vote, without intimidation, without interference, without fear. In recent months, we have seen troubling federal overreach. We've seen rhetoric and actions from the sitting president that threaten to undermine confidence in our democratic process and institutions and discourage civic participation, the lifeblood of our democracy. We won't allow that to happen. No president in recent history has been so hostile to free and fair elections. The president has tried to take control of elections, spread misinformation, and threatened folks working to keep elections secure. He's shifted the focus of the federal government away from protecting voters and toward chasing unfounded claims of fraud. Take, for example, the fact that the president and some of his allies have suggested deploying federal law enforcement to polling places, including references to ICE and the National Guard. What he's trying to do is clear. He sees the writing on the wall. He knows that the people are seeing through his lies and that he and his administration are deeply unpopular. It's why he continues to stoke conspiracy theories about the 2020 election, an election that courts across the country upheld. Instead of focusing on the real challenges Americans face, like affordability, Trump has manufactured an election integrity crisis and is using federal agencies to chase those misguided theories. And it's all in an effort to keep the doubt alive so that he can use it to justify unprecedented and illegal interference or to explain away electoral defeat. But he's getting more and more desperate because of his current losing streak in office. In a little over 1 year, California has taken Trump to court 59 times, and we've secured victories time and time again. Repeatedly, we've won over 80% of the time, including in our lawsuit against him for attempting to impose sweeping voting restrictions across the country. We secured a preliminary injunction against those restrictions and are arguing in favor of a permanent injunction tomorrow in Boston. The message we're sending is clear. As long as Trump is a repeat offender, he will be a repeat loser. We won't tolerate efforts to interfere with our elections or frighten Americans away from the ballot box. We're monitoring closely, preparing, and we're ready to act again. If Trump wants a lawful election, all he has to do is Nothing. In California, we're doing the opposite of voter suppression. We're expanding access, increasing transparency, and defending the right to vote. We understand the facts. Our elections are secure, they're transparent, they're accessible, and they're governed by law, not federal intimidation or the president's whims. We're prepared for the midterms. Voters will go to the polls. Elections will proceed, and the people won't be silenced. If this administration exceeds its authority, deploys federal agents to intimidate voters, or attempts to override state election laws, we'll meet them in court. In Trump's State of the Union last night, he once again failed to advance any message of hope or unity. He continued to peddle lies. He continued to demonstrate he can't accept a loss. He wants his party to prevail, seemingly by any means necessary. And it's why he's afraid of what's to come in 9 months. But in America, political power doesn't belong to a party or person. It belongs to us, the people. So we'll keep fighting to protect the freedom to vote, we'll protect the integrity of our elections, and we'll protect democracy itself, regardless of what Trump throws our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Bonta. Before I call on Ambassador Eisen, I just want to welcome, first of all, a couple of my colleagues that have joined us. Senator Warnock from Georgia. Commissioner, you may recognize him. And Senator Cortez Masto from the state of Nevada. I know Senator Warnock's in a time crunch. I'm going to let him speak and maybe ask some questions first, and then we'll come back to the witnesses. Senator Cortez Masto, let me know, too, if you have any time constraints you want to accommodate your participation to. Senator Warnock.
Thank you very much, Senator Padilla, and welcome to the entire panel. Thank you very much for being here. Last month, the Trump administration raided Fulton County, Georgia, and they took our voters' 2020 ballots. The 2020 election has been examined, has been litigated over and over again. Yet the president continues to spread conspiracy theories and outright lies, as recently as last night. Let's be clear. These lies are meant to create pretense to interfere in this year's midterm elections. And we won't let that happen. Commissioner Ivory, first, thank you for your service to Fulton County and to the people of Georgia. Welcome. When you first heard about the FBI raid, you reported that you headed over to the Fulton County Elections Office immediately. Is that right?
Correct. I got a text, and then I just jumped in my car and went over because I was worried about the workers.
Right. And when you arrived, can you tell us, what did you see?
As soon as I got there, I was led inside, and there were approximately anywhere from about 40 to 50 FBI agents. They were standing around, just sort of everybody was waiting. The first warrant that they served was procedurally incorrect, so they had to go back and correct it because it was served on our Director of Registration and Elections, and she is not not in the chain of custody of the ballots. It is our Clerk of Superior Court. So it took a few hours after that for that warrant to be corrected, and then they came back and they began the raid.
So they came, they had the wrong warrant. What did they tell you that they were doing? How did they explain their presence in Fulton County?
There was very little conversation. They told us to step back. They were here to get everything related to 2020, and that they would go in and get what they needed, and there was very little conversation.
Right. Now, this was an FBI raid, correct?
Correct.
And we all saw it, but I just want to establish that for the record. This is a raid by the FBI.
Yes.
But Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, was on the scene.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know what she was doing there? You saw her yourself.
Yes, I did.
Do you know what she was doing there?
I don't know why she was there.
Okay. Did the FBI tell you where they were taking the ballots or what they were going to do with them?
No.
Since the raid, have you received any information about how the ballots are being handled or what measures are in place to ensure that no one is tampering with those ballots?
No.
What types of sensitive voter data were contained in the boxes of ballots, and other materials taken by the FBI?
The materials included were the actual ballots, recap sheets, results tapes, and absentee ballot envelopes that contained personally identifiable information.
As a commissioner, as a servant of the people of Fulton County, are you concerned about what the administration will do with such sensitive data from Fulton County voters?
Yes.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. I have demanded an explanation from Pam Bondi about this raid. So far, I have not heard back from her. She has not offered one, but we'll keep demanding answers because if we don't stand up now, they won't stop with Fulton County. We saw this in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when Attorney General Bondi attempted to seize the state voters' roll in exchange for the withdrawal of ICE agents. They literally said, you want ICE out of your community? Hand over your voter rolls. Hand over your voter rolls if you want to end the occupation of your city. And I call it that because there are 600 police officers, over 3,000 federal agents. This is their project. They are already trying to cast doubt on the 2026 elections. Commissioner Ivory, what keeps you up at night when you think about the midterm elections, when you think about the seizing of voter rolls or voter records in Fulton County, a ransom note from the Attorney General to the people of Minneapolis? Does that bother you at all as you think about the midterm elections?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is a preview of what could happen nationally, which is attempted takeovers from multiple angles. I worry about the election workers who are everyday people coming to work to support their families and feel intimidated just going to work every day. The Fulton County Republican Party attempted to nominate 2 known election deniers to our Board of Registrations and Elections as a part of this. It's a complete movement. So what keeps me up at night is knowing that we in Fulton County are able and have secure, fair, and free elections. But voter suppression is a tactic that keeps people at home. And we have to fight to make sure that people know that their vote is important and that they have the right to exercise it.
No, thank you so much. It's very important for those of us in Congress to stand up against these moves by the president. And by the way, it shouldn't be a partisan issue.
No.
The great thing about America is we have robust arguments, and then the people get to have their say, and so we have to do everything we can here. But part of the effort of voter suppression is to so demoralize voters that they don't bother. So part of the answer is that the people of Fulton County and all across Georgia and all across our country have to show up and demand that our voices be heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Warnock. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Senator Padilla, for pulling this together. We so appreciate the importance. And as a former Secretary of State, I have to say, I'm so pleased that not only you are an integral part of our Senate caucus, but you bring great expertise, particularly in this area. So thank you. Thank you to the panelists for flying out here. Many of you I've had the opportunity to work with in the past. It's great to see everyone. Okay, so let me just jump into this. Last night, the president talked about why they need to pass the SAVE Act, this voter election legislation that they're talking about, Save America Act. And one of the reasons he talked about is because there's non-citizens that apparently are voting in our elections. So my question, let me start with Mr. Richer. Let me start with you. I appreciate your work. Thank you. You're a former elected Maricopa County recorder. You oversaw voter registration for one of the largest, right, counties in the country. I appreciate that coming from Clark County, Nevada. And so can you talk about how often did you or the state audit or review voter records for instances of non-citizen registrants? And when you did, what were the results?
So Arizona is somewhat unique in that we are one of the few states that requires documented proof of citizenship, which is, of course, a subject of great debate now at the federal level. But so in Arizona, in order to vote a full ballot, you do have to provide birth certificate or a passport upon registration. And so the number of instances that I came across that might have been a non-citizen who was on our voter registration rolls, and in Maricopa County, that's about 2.6 million people, was vanishingly few. And of those, even fewer had participated. And within the elections community, we often say, well, has anyone been prosecuted for this? And the Heritage Foundation helpfully keeps a database of election crimes over the last 30 years. And I think it's something like under 20 people have been prosecuted for being a non-citizen and participating in American elections over the last, say, 20 years.
Across the country.
Across the country.
Right. And can you talk a little bit and describe the infrastructure that states already have in place to ensure that non-citizens aren't voting?
Yeah. Well, under the NVRA, the National Voter Registration Act, it is currently unlawful to participate in any federal election and any state election if you are not a United States citizen. There are a few municipalities throughout the United States that allow you to participate if you are a lawful resident, but that is very few. There are checks, there are investigations. Recently, I noted in a piece that I did for the New York Times that states ranging from Utah to Michigan to Idaho to Louisiana have done affirmative investigations of their voter rolls, which includes using things like their state driver's license database or including the federal SAVE database that the president recently rolled out. And from those investigations, they have again found very, very, very few non-citizens on their voter rolls, and even a smaller percentage of which had actually participated in an election. We're talking less than 0.01% of each voter registration list.
So in essence, when the president talks last night and the Republicans are talking about trying to pass the Save America Act because we have to stop non-citizens from voting, it really is a solution in search of a problem.
I have great sympathy for policy debates, and I am somewhat sympathetic to this as a policy matter, but the factual predicate is often, I think, exaggerated would be the polite way to say it, in that it is largely non-existent.
And I'm curious for the other panel members, would anybody have any different statistics that show non-citizens are actually voting in our elections? I'm curious.
No, at Democracy Defenders Action, which I'm here representing today, Senator, we issued a report with LULAC, La Gran Mentira, the big lie of non-citizen and other illegal or unauthorized voting, and we cite the authorities on page 10 of that report. Center, left, and right agree that the incidences are so tiny that as a statistical matter, it should be considered zero. There literally is, according to the Heritage Report, such a small incident that it is difficult to measure.
Yeah, and General Bonta, let me ask you this, because I know as a former Attorney General during our elections, for 8 years during our elections, I partnered with the FBI and the Secretary of State as part of a task force to go after voter fraud and registration and fraud. And I can count on one hand, maybe two hands, the most, that when people did engage in that type of fraud, they were caught and they were prosecuted. I'm curious if you're seeing anything different in the state of California.
Not seeing anything different. I think all of the data points in the same direction, that there is no evidence of any significant, widespread voter fraud. There are rare occasions, statistically insignificant to non-existent, and we're seeing the same thing in California.
Yeah, thank you. I want to be respectful. I have one final question. Mr. Eisen, if you could touch on this. Again, the Save America Act claims it's saving our elections from fraudulent and non-citizen voting. But it imposes strict and overly burdensome requirements on individuals to register to vote. And you've talked a little bit about that. Would you please describe the process that a U.S. citizen, such as a married woman who changed her last name, would be forced to undergo in order to register to vote under the Save America Act that the Republicans and Trump administration want to pass?
The Save America Act would impose onerous burdens on married women who have changed their name or men who have changed their name as part of a marriage. People change their name for a variety of reasons. But, Senator, it would impose those burdens on every American. because think of what we've just described. No real problem, and you've heard distinguished officials who have overseen in Arizona and in California this situation, no real problem. And yet, to take only one example, you would need to provide forms of ID that many of us do not have handy, or if your name has changed, you would have to go through an elaborate process to register in the first place for mail-in voting. And then to request your ballot if you wanted to do early voting. There would be a second layer. And then when you actually cast your ballot on mail-in voting, a third hurdle that you have to jump. And then, of course, if you vote in person, you would have to present it as well. It's more like the hurdles you have to run in an Olympic event in the Summer Olympics than it is the kind of safe, free, fair voting that those of all parties have made possible through outstanding election administrations and, frankly, outstanding participation by American voters who are not cheating. It should be deeply offensive that those kinds of burdens are being imposed when there is no real problem that this solution is chasing.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto. Welcome the arrival of my colleague representing the state of California, Senator Adam Schiff, as well as our neighbor to the north, Senator Merkley. And just one thing I did want to point out, and we're going to return to Ambassador Eisen and Mr. Richard for their opening statements, but in the exchange between Senator Cortez Masto and several of the panelists, there was reference to the SAVE Act, and there was reference to the SAVE program within the Department of Homeland Security. There are two different things, but in these Republican efforts, intertwined. The SAVE program is a database that they have suggested, well, we should run all the names through this database to determine who's a citizen and who's not. When other applications of the SAVE database has shown that it has false positives on a very regular basis. So you can call it inaccurate, you can call it false, you can call it whatever it is, but it is not exact and very risky, dangerous proposition to apply it to voter eligibility. So just want to get that clarification for folks watching at home. I'll turn now to Ambassador Eisen for your opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Padilla, for inviting me to be here today, and to the members of your caucus who are welcoming this distinguished panel to address these critically important issues between the presence of yourself, Senator Padilla, and my friend, Senator Schiff. I feel that I'm also in a Dodgers safe zone, so that makes me feel good.
General, though, part of this.
Well, let's not drag him into this.
Arizonans don't like that.
My name is Norman Eisen, and I have been working in and around American elections for more than a quarter of a century. As I said to Senator Cortez Masto, I'm here on behalf of Democracy Defenders Action, which I co-founded. I also chair its sister organization, Democracy Defenders Fund. We have more than 250 legal cases and matters pushing back against the Trump administration's attacks on our democracy, and I like to think protecting the future of American democracy. Among the most important of those matters is the litigation that we have done to assure that American elections remain safe, free, and fair. Donald Trump and his recent calls to take over elections as represented by the SAVE Act and the fatally flawed SAVE database, despite the Constitution clearly assigning the authority over elections to the states and Congress, the president's attempted takeovers are not new. They reflect a pattern that we have seen throughout the first year of his tenure his second term in office. But the good news is they have not succeeded, and that assures us that if we see things in 2026, like a massive surge of ICE to the polls, that will fail as well. One of the most consequential of those Trump election takeover efforts of 2025 was the executive order on voting, issued early that year. It was yet another effort to introduce barriers to Americans participating at the polls. Together with our partners, we met that threat in the courts. The United States District Court here in D.C. struck down key portions of the order. I do want to salute my friend A.G. Bonta and the state AGs who litigated in parallel and also achieved injunctive relief. That experience offers an important perspective on the present moment, because it signals that if our elections and our voters and our democracy itself are attacked again, that the democracy movement, the people of the United States, those who go to court and the courts themselves, stand ready to defend and win on the protection of our elections and our democracy. Another important attempted election takeover came through Donald Trump's illegitimate redistricting, when he and Texas Republicans attempted to steal 5 congressional seats through illicit redistricting. I was so proud with Texas co-counsel to represent those brave Texas legislators who fled the state. I went with them to Illinois to help sound the alarm. And as a native Californian, I was proud that California, including A.G. Bonta, responded to the alarm and did Proposition 50, 5 new seats. We at Democracy Defenders Action, in parallel with the AG representing the state and attorneys for the political parties, defended Prop 50 in court. And the United States Supreme Court just ruled without a single noted dissent that win, defending those 5 seats, countering the election theft, would be upheld. Again, it gives me confidence for what we may see ahead this year if we do the hard work. Instead of the Trump takeover represented by the SAVE Act, Congress instead must pass critical reforms like the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. At Democracy Defenders Action, and on behalf of everyone in the democracy movement that has been so strong in standing up for the future of American democracy this year, we stand ready to work with you on those important initiatives and on protecting the future of American democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before recognizing Mr. Richard, let me welcome Senators Cantwell and Durbin to today's forum. Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Ranking Member Padilla, and thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss election administration. My name is Stephen Richer, and I am the former elected Maricopa County Recorder. I'm a Republican, which I think makes me fairly unique at this table, from Phoenix, Arizona, and my duties included voter registration and parts of election administration for the county's 4.5 million residents. I am now CEO of the consulting firm Republic Affairs, a legal fellow at the Cato Institute, I have some of my colleagues here with me, and a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Over the past 6 years, the American public has debated seemingly everything under the sun with respect to election administration. Should we have same-day voter registration? Should we mail ballots to all registered voters, or should we just mail them to those who ask for them? Did Hugo Chavez manipulate tabulation equipment to change votes from Trump to Biden? Should mail ballots be accepted after Election Day if postmarked by Election Day? Should American elections be more like France or like Florida, or is Florida like France? Does requiring voter identification disenfranchise large segments of Americans? Did Georgia enact Jim Crow 2.0 in 2021? And does the president have authority under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution to unilaterally undo the National Voter Registration Act and change election law for the entire country? Some of these are policy debates, and I have a great deal of patience for policy debates. So the only thing I'll say on this front is that there are significant benefits to federalism in election administration. Federalism in election administration allows states to recognize their unique attributes. For example, in the West, where I'm from, many states support mail voting because of their larger geographic distances. Federalism strengthens election security. There isn't, for instance, one hack that can disrupt all 50 states. And federalism encourages democratic entrepreneurship. Different states can test different things. And it's for this reason that I was skeptical of the For the People Act introduced in 2021 by congressional Democrats, despite my support of some of the underlying goals. And it's also for this reason that I'm skeptical of today's SAVE Act, Save America Act, and Make Elections Great Again Act, despite supporting some of the underlying policy preferences. All else even, in my humble opinion, election administration should be left to the states. But more worrisome to me are debates of facts. For the past 5 years, I've made it my hobby to answer as many elections questions as possible, on live streams, on videos, on teletown halls, on election tours, on social media, by email, and in auditoriums where I've been booed by lots and lots of people. Some people have called my hobby quixotic or Sisyphean. Some have called it treasonous, and some have called it heroic. But for some reason that should probably be medicated, I just can't let it go, and so I continue to play whack-a-mole, and today I offer you a few lately popular moles. Mole number one we've largely already talked about, which is the large number of non-citizens voting in American elections, the alleged large number of non-citizens voting in American elections. The number we referenced earlier from the Heritage Foundation's database of election crimes, it cites only 24 such unlawful incidents from 2003 to 2023. The affirmative investigations into whether or not there are non-citizens on the voter rolls that states have undertaken, in recent years, those states include Utah, which found one non-citizen who was registered of the state's 2.1 million registrants, Idaho, Michigan, Georgia twice, Louisiana, Arizona, Montana, North Carolina, and all of those came back with fewer than 0.01% of their registrants were non-citizens. Mole number two, results that come in after initial returns are fraudulent. Speaker Mike Johnson recently told the press that, quote, "We had 3 Republican candidates who were ahead on election day in the last cycle, and every time a new tranche of ballots came in, they just magically whittled away until their leads were lost. It looks on its face to be fraudulent. Can I prove that? No," end quote. This is an unfortunate,
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. That quote you just referenced, he was specifically talking about California.
Were all 3 in California?
All 3 were in California.
Okay.
Because surprise, we want to make sure every vote was counted.
So, all 3 in California. And it obviously reflects a misunderstanding of how ballots are tabulated. Speaker Johnson likely imagines ballot tabulation to be like a barrel full of randomly assorted M&Ms. And if you stick your hand into the barrel, you get a representative sample of the larger barrel. But ballot tabulation occurs in distinct tranches that are not reflective of the total vote. For example, in Arizona, we first report mail ballots that have been returned early. Then we report votes from people who voted on Election Day. And then we report early ballots dropped off on Election Day. In Arizona in 2020, this meant that initially, with initial returns, Democrats were far, far ahead, and then Republicans slowly came back, including in my own race, and President Trump nearly came back. This was not fraud. This was simply how we tabulate ballots in Arizona. Mole 3, final mole, tabulation machines can't be trusted. No machine should be trusted blindly, but that's not what administrators do. Election officials only use tabulation software that is state and federally certified. Election officials run mock ballots through the tabulators before the election to make sure tabulators are accurate. In most jurisdictions, election administrators run the same test again after the election. And in most jurisdictions, there are post-election hand count audits. And in 99% of jurisdictions, Americans vote with paper ballots. This means that no matter the allegations of hacking, no matter the allegations of connectivity to the internet, and no matter the allegation of Italian spy satellites reprogramming machines, it doesn't matter because we can always go back to the paper ballots. This saved Georgia in 2020. I understand that for many politicians, election administration is just another square on the political chessboard. And if you lie about it, well, it doesn't really matter because you need the clicks and your opponents lied about something else. But I'm here to tell you about the downstream effects. In my 4 years in office, I saw Maricopa County's tabulation center transform from a place where you could walk right up to the front door to 4 years later, it was a veritable fortress surrounded by barricades, gates, sheriff cars, floodlights, drones, and even snipers. If you're in a position of power, when you lie about election administration, you turn election administration into a war zone. You damage the lives of the bipartisan men and women working the process, and you potentially even endanger their lives. We will have elections in November of this year. Our system is too big, too disaggregated, and it has too many good people working in it for it to be otherwise. But whether or not we have elections that are trusted by the American public, that is in part up to the prominent people who can choose whether or not to lie about our elections. Many of those people are in this city, and many of those people are in this building. Please tell the truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll have to come back to mole number 17 at some point and talk about bamboo fibers. But before we do that, let me, out of respect for members' schedules, turn to Senator Cantwell first for a couple of questions before she has to leave for another engagement.
Thank you, Chairman Padilla. Am I on? Oh, now I am, I think. Thank you for that question. Obviously, we're here to discuss the SAVE Act and heard some of the testimony from the ambassador and Mr. Riker. I'm worried about two things on the big national front. I'm a big vote by mail state and obviously believe in this safety and security of the system based on your signature, the fact that that signature can be tracked and traced. We basically have our state patrol basically train the actual people in the auditor's office on checking those signatures. Every signature is checked. The fact that you have to sign your name right below a thing that says if you aren't a U.S. citizen, you're going to go to jail for 5 years or $10,000 fine or both, pretty strong deterrent. So I appreciate you, Mr. Riker, talking about those minuscule numbers. I actually think I can't even say it correctly. It's 1/10,000th of a percent. So somehow we're saying we're going to disenfranchise millions of people to somehow improve on 1/10,000th of a percent. So that's one way to look at this. But the other way is like, I'm frightened over these notions that the Homeland Security could somehow tell a state we're disenfranchising 100,000 voters because we've looked at the rolls and we think there's a problem, and hey, you better not count these 100,000 people. Oh, and by the way, we're going to take all this information that we're gathering, phone numbers and rolls of data provided on either registration or other gathering, and use it to spy on Americans or basically build, I'm not sure why it's not a violation of the privacy laws. So do you worry about this uber homeland vigilance against U.S. citizens, either in kicking them off the rolls and us not being able to do anything about it, or use of that data in a way that is similar to what Doge did, selling it and basically exposing Social Security numbers, phone numbers, and other sensitive information about U.S. citizens? Either one.
He's a libertarian, so I think I know what he's going to say. I'll offer the beginnings of an answer, Senator Cantwell. I think the Doge example is so important. At Democracy Defenders Action, we've litigated against them and continue to do so. In fact, we're due to take Elon Musk's deposition for the illegal dismantling of USAID. And that approach to the use of our data, we were the first to get an order locking Doge out at the Treasury Department of some of our most sensitive databases, and the more general illegality of this administration, where the courts have ruled against them over 200 times. Every American should be profoundly concerned about the handling of the data. It does implicate the Privacy Act. There have been multiple Privacy Act lawsuits brought against the administration. As we discussed earlier, the SAVE database has had false positives. Prior efforts to collate this data typically do end up targeting individuals who are eligible to vote. They're falsely targeted. So I think it is a profoundly concerning issue. Americans like their freedoms, and the voting system works. Let's not, if it ain't broke, let's not fix it.
I think from an election administrator standpoint, federal databases can be helpful. But as Senator Padilla mentioned, the number of false positives that have come back so far from the SAVE database, which was previously just used to check if the registrant had naturalized, is now being used as a global U.S. citizenship database, has so far shown itself to be less than perfect. And so I would say to any election administrator, who are the people who actually manage the voter rolls, that it is a tool, but it should not be dispositive. That if it comes back as a positive, then I think you have an obligation to further investigate that before removing somebody from the voter rolls.
Well, I think that's the problem. That's not the way the bill is written. You have, or any county has a recourse on a provisional ballot. You can file a provisional ballot and then you can resolve the issue later. But if they kick you off the voter rolls because Homeland takes over the voter roll and says, no, these are not citizens, why do I care? Listen, they said a guy in my state was dead. Okay, the Social Security Administration said he was dead and wouldn't pay him. And he went to the federal building many times. He showed up in person. He showed up on the national news. I'm not dead. Give me my Social Security check. And they still wouldn't give him the Social Security check. So I'm pretty sure they can kick some people off a voter roll and then disenfranchise them. The question is, what are we going to do to stop them? That's the real question. And the safeguards existing in the system today, like a provisional ballot, won't be there under the SAVE Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Senator Merkley's next, followed by Senator Schiff.
Thank you all very, very much for bringing your expertise to bear. I want to focus on two pieces. One, vote by mail, and second, the potential purging of a national voter data base. And so starting with vote by mail, there was a shot across the bow where the post office said, well, we won't necessarily postmark ballots on the day that they're dropped. And that was intended to create a little bit of confusion around the situation of whether or not your ballot, if mailed by the deadline, would actually get counted or not, get marked appropriately. But much more seriously than that is a requirement that ID be copied and put into the envelope when you vote by mail. And I know a lot of folks would be pretty uncomfortable that they're putting their birth certificate in there with how they're voting on a presidential race or any other race, just in terms of the privacy of the voting process. But certainly it's a huge encumbrance for people to have to go out to find the open copy shop. I mean, rich people may all have a copier in their house, but a lot of families, most families don't. And so that's a huge encumbrance. But more broadly, my understanding of why Trump hates vote by mail is because he knows that Election Day can be so easily manipulated. You can move the precinct location. You can put in workers who don't work. You can put in machines that don't work. You can put intimidators outside to make people feel uncomfortable about being there. You can proceed to put out misinformation about the date. You can put out misinformation about the place. You can create long lines and tell people they can't get a glass of water handed to them. All these things happen, and that type of manipulation is well known, which is why vote by mail, which Oregon pioneered, is a much higher integrity system. So this is my version of the world, but you're the experts. Do I have this story right? Is this why Trump hates vote by mail, is because he wants to manipulate Election Day? Or am I off track? Is it something entirely different?
I think you're on track. You know, in California, we've really removed obstacles, provided many ways and days to vote. You can vote 30 days before until Election Day by mail. You can vote at an early polling center, voting center. You can vote on Election Day in person. And because there's so many different ways and days to vote, if your goal is suppression and repression and disenfranchisement, it's harder, as you mentioned, to target it. And so I think you are on point on that, and I think that is part of why Trump is going after vote by mail. I note that he and his family vote by mail, and so he sees it reliable enough to use. And in California, we have brought the vote closer to many more voters because of that access. I think that's our job as elected officials to provide that access. And the documentary proof of citizenship stands to disenfranchise millions of voters. With an American population of over 340 million, we have 69 million married women who've changed their name, who would have a birth certificate that doesn't match their current name. They could lose their ability to vote. We have 60 million rural voters who live far away from government offices, where they would need to go in person with a documentary proof of citizenship, who could lose their ability to vote. We have 140 million people who do not have a passport. And passports and birth certificates are the two major ways to provide the documentary proof of citizenship. So those are in the tens of millions. And that's by design. The whole point is to disenfranchise and suppress voting. And especially as we've discussed multiple times here from multiple sources, there's no evidence of any real voter fraud. So it is very much a solution in search of a problem, but that solution has its own agenda, which is to reduce voting in our elections.
Ambassador, you look like you were itching to add something to that.
I just wanted to compliment Oregon as a model state in its universal vote by mail. Oregonians vote at a much higher percentage because they vote by mail. There's no statistically significant incidents of misconduct. And as for the president's motivations, who can discern those twisted pathways of motive? Among the other reasons that we might ascribe are looking for excuses for failure. Any excuse, and certainly with the extreme unpopularity of the administration, those excuses may very well be necessary in 2026.
Well, the main point I wanted to make here with your all's approval is vote by mail is a very high integrity system. Voting at the polling booth, there's many forms of manipulation that have been readily used in different states at different times. And so he wants to replace a high integrity system with a low integrity system, or lower. And I wanted to note that in Oregon, we have ballot initiatives. And people really love being able to sit at the kitchen table when they're voting and study the complexity of these issues. Very hard to do that in the voting booth. And they love the ability to also discuss how important voting is with their children when they're sitting at the table wrestling with that. Those are additional pieces. I want to turn to the concern over a national voter database, registration database, and the possibility of it being purged. My understanding of the SAVE Act is that states would be required to submit their voter database. We saw the Attorney General try to coerce Minnesota into handing over their list by saying, we'll take out ICE if you will give us your voter database. We saw the national effort that Oregon, California, and others challenged successfully in court, refusing to hand over their voting database. And once it's in the hands of the national, what comes back, a whole lot of people may be missing. And my understanding is there's nothing in that law that says people even get notified. So you may go to the poll, you may have voted for 20 years and suddenly discover you aren't registered to vote anymore. The potential for manipulation through the purging of names is massive and scary as hell. Is there any reason that am I exaggerating, or is it scary as hell? You can answer shortly, because I know we've got a lot of other colleagues who want to ask questions.
As the law currently exists under the National Voter Registration Act, if, for instance, an election office sends out a piece of mail and it comes back as undeliverable, or if we get information otherwise that you no longer live there that is accessible or that is permissible under the NVRA, then we have to send you a 35-day notice. And only if that 35-day notice comes back as undeliverable, or if you don't take action, only then could we move you to inactive status. And then you have to stay on inactive status for 2 cycles. Now, of course, the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, and the Make Elections Great Again Act would all considerably rewrite the National Voter Registration Act. I think that the National Voter Registration Act is very voter-centric in mind. I'll confess that sometimes I wish it were even a little bit easier to do list maintenance, but its default setting is to protect the voter at all costs. And I can see from a constitutional rights standpoint the thinking behind that.
So, Mr. Richard, before I recognize Senator Schiff, a quick follow-up question for you. The National Voter Registration Act that you referenced, was that passed on a partisan basis?
I know it was passed in 1993, and so I'm thinking you know the answer to this question.
It was passed on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis. So it wasn't, it's, you know, we're living in an age where everything can swing, as the pendulum swings from one cycle to the next, depending on who's in the majority or who's in the White House. But once upon a time, not that long ago, smart, common sense policy was made on an overwhelming bipartisan basis, the NVRA being one of them. So I know we have a lot more ideas and questions to get to, but we have a lot of colleagues that also want to speak and ask questions. Senator Schiff, followed by Senator Ossoff.
Senator Padilla, thank you. Senator Padilla, thank you so much for holding this hearing. Couldn't be more important, it couldn't be more timely, and thank you for all your work on this subject. We're lucky to have a former Secretary of State from California in the Senate, and Attorney General Bonta, thank you for all the litigation you brought on this topic and so many others to defend our state from some of the harmful policies of this administration. Greatly, greatly appreciated. I do have to take issue, Mr. Richard, with something you said. When you said that the Speaker's comments, which you quoted, must reflect a misunderstanding that he has of how the voting works and how absentee ballots may differ from same-day voting, or early absentees may differ from late absentees. There's no misunderstanding. Everyone in this building understands how elections work. We depend on them. We understand exactly how absentee ballots can differ. So when the Speaker says that it must be fraud, he can't prove it, it must be fraud, he's just lying to the country. And this is what has really differentiated this decade from the decades that preceded it, people's willingness to simply lie about our elections, to cast doubt on our elections for political purposes. I chaired the hearing of the January 6th committee that was focused on the efforts by the administration in 2020 to pressure state and local elected officials and poll workers. We focused very heavily on Georgia, on the courage of Brad Raffensperger not to find 11,780 votes that did not exist, and the courage of Gabe Sterling, who warned that people would get killed, and sadly people did get killed. Election workers like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who demonstrated great courage when their lives were turned upside down. And in Arizona, Speaker Rusty Bowers, who testified that when he was pressured by Giuliani to overturn the results there, that he took an oath to the Constitution, and he had a responsibility to God not to violate his principles. My question, I guess, and I'll start with the two of you in Georgia and Arizona, is that bulwark we had in 2000 of state and local elected officials, many of them, like yourself, Republicans, Mr. Richer, protected our elections because they were devoted to the law. My question is, what effort have you seen in your states to essentially purge those people? In Arizona, I understand that the legislature is considering a bill that would authorize ICE at polling stations, even require it. So how has the safeguard of independent elections officials been battered over the last year or years? And then I have a question for our remaining witnesses after that.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Commissioner Mo Ivory. And I will say that I think there are two instances. Our state election board in Georgia has taken steps to pass legislation that takes the Secretary of State out of the position of Chief Officer of the state elections and allows them to appoint their own superintendent to do such. So that is one area where they're taking away the power of a decision that they do not agree with and handing it over to someone who they will put in place to make sure that it is the result that they want. As far as Fulton County goes, on our State Registration and Elections Board, we have 2 nominees that come from the Republicans and 2 nominees that come from the Democratic Party, and then there is a chair who is appointed by our chairman with a vote. Right now, there are 2 MAGA election deniers that are trying to have a space on the board, and we are now in court litigating whether or not we are even allowed to vote yes or no on their nominee presentations. In the past, whenever a party nominated a person to the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections, we had the right to vote yes, no, or abstain. Right now, that is being litigated in court because they are trying to take the right away from us as Fulton County Commissioners to say who we want on our elections board. In the past, when a nominee from the Republican Party was presented and they did not get a 4-vote majority on the Board of Commissioners, they would merely present another nominee, and we would then go ahead and vote on it. But that is not the posture that they are taking anymore. They want these election deniers on the Fulton County Board of Registrations and Elections, and they're taking it all the way to court to do that. So these are some of the actions that we've seen in Georgia.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that taking Brad Raffensperger off that commission and putting someone else in allowed the commission to come up with phony findings that were used to justify the execution of that search warrant.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Richer in Arizona?
It's no secret that telling the truth about the 2020 election is not a terribly popular position to take in a Republican primary. There's a reason I'm here with you guys today instead of administering the Tempe mayoral that's going on right now in Maricopa County, and that's true of Speaker Bowers as well, who was unsuccessful in his reelection in the Republican primary. So things have changed, and certainly that sentiment is pervasive within many who are running for office now. I still have great confidence in our state laws, in our state courts, and in just the sheer number of people who are involved in the election administration process. I think that elections will be administered lawfully and fairly. I still think that the greater risk of disruption and harm to the process comes from the national level, comes from leading federal spokespeople, and comes potentially from the federal government itself, which I think could be the new chapter that was perhaps presaged by the recent activities in Fulton County.
If I could just ask the 2 remaining witnesses very briefly, what efforts are you making in California? What efforts can be made to try to insulate local elections officials from pressure from their own states, or in California, where the state can help local elections officials should the federal government seek to intervene in a particular House race, for example?
Well, we got a preview in last November's election when we had Prop 50 on the ballot, and the United States Department of Justice, led by, in the Civil Rights Division, led by Harmeet Dillon, sent so-called elections auditors to come to an election in California where there was only one thing on the ballot. It was a statewide election on a statewide proposition. And what we did was we sent observers to each of the polling stations to make sure there was no unlawful conduct, no intimidation, no voter suppression or disenfranchisement efforts by the United States federal government. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of faith and trust in their presence. As it turned out, gratefully, there was no misconduct that we were able to observe, but we thought it was important to be there and be present. And we are also, I'll say, the Democratic Attorneys General, 24 of us now, are gaming out all of the potential scenarios that we can think of for how our elections will be attacked or undermined, from having ICE or military at or near polling stations. And there's a federal law that specifically prohibits that, but the law has not been an obstacle for this federal administration. What we would do, what kind of papers we would file with the court, what kind of order we would seek, interference by the United States Post Office on vote by mail, attacks of the vote-by-mail system more broadly. We've done tabletop exercises and looked at all the ruthless ways a federal administration intent on undermining the will of the voters could do so. So we think we owe that to our constituents, and so we've been gaming out the different scenarios and preparing action in response.
Senator, part of the way that the democracy movement has met Donald Trump's flood the zone with rule of law shock and awe over this past year, with more than 200 successful court outcomes, has been a 1-2 punch of the state AGs and our state officials doing that wonderful work, and civil society, civil rights groups, democracy groups like Democracy Defenders Action and Fund doing theirs. We also were fully deployed everywhere there was a DOJ observer on November 4th. We, sometimes representing clients like the city of Los Angeles, pro bono, sometimes private actors. We were deployed as well. We offer representation, again, pro bono, to everyone from governors on down, including all the way to local election officials. In fact, that's how I first met Stephen Risher, who now sits on our board, to make sure, we're a nonpartisan organization with a strong bipartisan board, to make sure that anybody who is threatened benefits from having belt and suspenders support. We will meet whatever is tried with that same overwhelming rule of law shock and awe. We will succeed in defending our elections in 2026 and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schiff. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Senator Padilla, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for your efforts. It's a pleasure in particular to welcome you, Commissioner Ivory, representing Fulton County. Thank you for your presence here today.
Thank you.
You know, just a few days after the president sent the FBI and the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to seize Fulton County voters' ballots in Georgia, the prominent conservative commentator Eric Erickson published an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Mr. Erickson's op-ed was titled, quote, "Despite 2020 election loss, Trump now uses government to engineer new result." And in that op-ed, Eric Erickson compared the president and his lieutenants, who still persist in this sore losers crusade, to clowns. So there are some voices on the right willing to call a spade and to say what everybody knows, that this is and always has been a pack of lies launched by a sore loser who was intent on clinging to power after he was cast out by the people in 2020. But what's really astounding, and Commissioner, you know this, living as we do in the state of Georgia, given that Georgia's been ground zero for so much of this, is how many Republican office holders and candidates and activists and prominent commentators just go along with the lie, even to this day. Even in the face of, as recently as December of last year, just a few weeks ago, I don't know if you saw this, Commissioner, the president shared a post on Truth Social calling for Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp to be arrested. Let me just repeat that. Just a few weeks ago, so committed to vengeance, so committed to overturning his 2020 defeat is the president. Just a few weeks ago, he shared a post online calling for the Republican governor of Georgia to be arrested for having refused half a decade ago to overturn the election result in Georgia. And still, so many prominent Republicans in Georgia who know better indulge the president's lies and continue to support Donald Trump. Commissioner, I think it's worth just reviewing some of the history in Georgia, if you'll allow us. Senator Padilla. Commissioner, do you remember just 7 days after the 2020 election when Gabriel Sterling, one of Georgia's top election officials and a lifelong Republican, he held that press conference about the president's false claims? You recall the press conference?
Yes.
He described the president's false claims, this is 7 days after the election, as, quote, hoaxes and nonsense. You recall that?
Yes.
And at that same press conference, he sounded the alarm that these false claims of fraud were stirring up threats of violence. And then he called out the president for failing to condemn those threats of violence. He said, quote, Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. He went on, Mr. Sterling, quote, this is elections, this is the backbone of democracy, and all of you who have not said a damn word are complicit in this. It's too much, end of quote. Remember that, Commissioner?
Yes.
And then Senator Padilla, and I'm sure Commissioner Ivory remembers this as well, mid-November, according to the Associated Press, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said that Senator Lindsey Graham, a member of this body, had called him and suggested that he toss out legally cast votes. That was the Secretary's interpretation of Senator Graham's call. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay, a few weeks later, according to CBS News, Trump calls Georgia's Attorney General, Chris Carr. And the Attorney General told the president that his offices had investigated claims of fraud and not found evidence to substantiate it. You recall that, Commissioner?
Yes.
But then it wasn't just Georgia officials. It was the Trump administration refuting the president's false claims. Trump administration's Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, reported on November 12th, quote, the November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. That was the Trump administration's finding. December 1st, President Trump's own Attorney General, Bill Barr, said, quote, DOJ investigators have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. You remember that, Commissioner?
I do.
And then nonetheless, Trump then turned to his own team at DOJ, Ambassador, and told them in a conversation, I believe at the White House on December 27th, quote, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. So, Ambassador, make sure I have these facts correct. The president's own attorney general told him there was not fraud that could change the course of the election, but the president nevertheless tells DOJ officials, quote, just say the election is corrupt. Is that what happened, Ambassador?
Yes, and I can tell you, I never saw anything like that in the Obama White House, Senator.
Okay, so now let's fast forward 5 days, Commissioner. 5 days later, January 2nd, that is when President Trump calls Secretary Raffensperger. And we've got the image up here. He demands that Raffensperger, quote, find 1,780 votes, end quote, to overturn the result in election. You recall that, Commissioner?
Yes, I do.
2 days later, January 4th, Gabe Sterling gives a press conference. He says that Trump's claims were, quote, all easily provably false, end quote. And yet, said Mr. Sterling, quote, the president persists and by doing so undermines Georgians' faith in the election system. He further said that the president's legal team had, quote, intentionally misled the state Senate voters and the people of the United States with their false claims of ballot tampering in Georgia. Do you recall that, Commissioner?
I do.
And 2 days later, the U.S. Capitol was sacked. Gabe Sterling had warned of violence, and 2 days after that press conference, the United States Capitol was sacked. The president's mob sought the vice president to try to hang him in this place. Violent criminals, the president later pardoned and released en masse. And still, 5 years later, court case after court case, the president and his allies have lost, recount after recount. He persists to the point where, bring me back to the beginning, he's still calling for the arrest of Georgia's governor. Question for you, Commissioner Ivory, because you and I were in church on hallowed ground at Big Bethel AME together a couple weeks ago. Georgia is the cradle of the civil rights movement. So much was given, so much was lost to secure the right to vote. Do you think that for one moment Georgia voters will be deterred by these attempts to silence them?
No. Georgia voters are steadfast in their right to vote. They've seen these voter suppression tactics before. They know what it is. They know why people are coming for their vote, why this president persists, and they will not be deterred. They have called me. They have answered in my social media, what do I need to do?
Thank you,
And I tell
Commissioner.
them over.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator Klobuchar has joined us. She's on a tight window of time. She's going to get
No, I'll
a
be
question
quick,
in
very
before moving
quick.
on.
Thank
and then
you,
I'll get a
Mr.
chance
Yu.
to ask questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I feel like old home week here with our work, and I'm so glad that Alex Padilla is leading this important effort, and his experience as Secretary of State will be really important in the days, weeks, months, years to come. So thank you. So I guess I'd ask the first question of you, Attorney General. You and other state officials, including Republican officials in Georgia, New Hampshire, and West Virginia, have refused to comply with DOJ's voter file demands. And I think it's important to realize there are Republican, tell me if I'm wrong, but Republican Secretary of State who have agreed with you on this. Why should we be concerned about the efforts to pressure states into providing private and sensitive personal information about our constituents to the administration? As you know, it was one of the initial demands to get ICE out of Minnesota was this. But I was always able to point out, as was our Secretary of State, Steve Simon, that in fact Republican secretaries of state have said no to this. Tell us why.
Thank you for the question. First, it's an honor to serve alongside A.G. Ellison, who's been a great leader and a great friend in this important work. And I think after we got the same day that we got the request to hand over the voter rolls in California, Senator Padilla and I, he texted me, we spoke on the phone, and, you know, as you might expect as a former Secretary of State and someone who's very concerned about our ability to exercise our right to vote here in this country, we have seen a very disturbing trend of the federal government trying to access databases that have clear restrictions on their use and trying to amass a massive surveillance database for multiple purposes. We've seen SNAP data sought. We've seen Medicaid data sought. We've seen voter roll data sought. Some or all for immigration enforcement purposes when the data is restricted only for eligibility determination use and has strict guardrails and privacy protections and limitations, and others to amass a database to potentially purge voter rolls. So it is important that we stand for the rule of law. I'm grateful. We don't see it that often, so I'm even more grateful when we see it, that Republican leaders are standing for this as well and pushing back so that our elections are not disturbed.
And thank you for mentioning Attorney General Ellison. And just also one other thing, there's been 4 federal judges, is this right, that have actually, including those appointed by President Trump, who've ruled that the efforts to obtain this data from Minnesota, and you as Attorney General know this, California, have also been turned down. Is this correct?
Yes, we've been prevailing in court because there's no basis for the request, for the demand.
Very good. And I think it's really important for people to know that piece of it. I'm sure you tell them all the time.
Yes.
But thank you. Mr. Eisen, welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you, Senator.
So many titles. So does a president have the legal authority to end vote by mail?
No, the Constitution entrusts principal responsibility for administering elections to the states with some residual role for Congress. Congress can legislate in this area. There is no presidential authority by executive order, by pushing illegal and unconstitutional legislation like the SAVE Act or otherwise for a Trump takeover of our elections. And if, when SAVE fails in this body, the president attempts, as he attempted to do with his first election CEO, that AG Bonta and his colleagues in Democracy Defenders Action and our colleagues on behalf of LULAC successfully blocked in court. If there is another EO trying to do it, we'll be in court instantly and we will stop it once more because it's unconstitutional and it's wrong.
Very good, very clear. Just quick, Commissioner, the importance of the mail-in voting in your county and in your state.
Oh, so important as it is anywhere else, but so important that after, excuse me, much success of absentee ballot voting in 2020, SB 202 was put in place in 2021 by our Republican legislature to make sure that that which we call the biggest voter suppression bill in Georgia, to make sure that that was decreased, and there are continuing efforts to lessen that ability, that form of voting. So,
Right.
Of course, right. Right.
Good. I actually do remember we did a field hearing with Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff there when we did the Rules Committee, and that was really quite extraordinary, the stories that we got out of Georgia. So
Yes.
thank you, and thank you for your work as well, Mr. Richard, but I'm going to pass it on so I can go to my appointment, which is being on TV. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Welcome, Senator Welch. I get to shoehorn in a few questions here before recognizing Senator Welch, and I think I'll apologize for Attorney General Bonta in advance. He's got a plane to catch, I believe. He's only got a few minutes left with us. But let me engage in a speed round. First of all, quick question for all of you. Raise your hand or chime in if you believe, as President Trump suggested in the State of the Union last night, that there is rampant cheating in our elections. All right, I see heads nodding no, which is my understanding as well. So all the changes, all the power grabs, it's all baseless, based on the big lie, no merit to their accusations. Mr. Bonta, the lawsuit on the executive order from last March was referenced. I think that was the first or among the first cases that you chose to take the lead on amongst your Attorney General colleagues across the country. Through that case or others, can you speak to the value of the coordination and collaboration amongst Attorney Generals in this fight? And are there any sort of lessons that you would want other Attorney Generals to share, Democrat or Republican, that may not be part of this teamwork you all seem to have going on?
Thank you. The coalition, the collaboration, the partnership among the Democratic Attorneys General, I think, has been incredibly powerful. We are all sort of sovereigns, a group of co-equals voluntarily coming together to team up to be a greater whole than the sum of our parts and to accomplish important results and deliver outcomes for the people when it comes to defending the rule of law, protecting our democracy, defending the Constitution, protecting rights and freedoms. And we started planning before Trump was elected, in case he was elected, and then we planned more between his election and his inauguration, and we speak regularly, communicate regularly every week, and it's led to, at least for California's final number as of today, 59 lawsuits in less than that many weeks, and 80% victory rate, protecting $200 billion, protecting critical rights and freedoms like birthright citizenship and voting rights. I'll also say that the work of Norm and the private parties and plaintiffs, the nonprofits, it's all a part of an incredible coalition. The 1-2 punch, the 1-2-3 punch, on the tariffs case, when we had the private businesses suing alongside the AGs, that was important. And anyone who's ready to stand up and be courageous and stand up for the rule of law and join in these lawsuits to hold a lawless president accountable is welcome, and it's an important fight. And this coalition has been very impactful and effective, I'm proud to say, and it's because we work together, because we are partnering, and because we have a coalition of collaboration.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your service, your leadership, and your friendship.
Thank you. Likewise.
Commissioner Ivory, you've responded to my colleagues' questions for the last hour and a half, almost going to be 2 hours before we know it. And they've talked to you about some of the facts of the FBI raid and the presence of Director Gabbard. I guess my question would be, aside from the legality, constitutionality of what's happened and how that's being addressed, what implication does that seizure have for folks preparing to administer the midterm elections on the election administration side, and for the public and voters' perspective in whether or not or how they'll participate in the primaries and the general?
Thank you for that question. I will say that Fulton County election workers are steadfast in their devotion to administering the 2026 elections, as they have done with all elections. I immediately, when I heard about the raid, I immediately went down there because I felt that I wanted them to know that they were supported in their work and to make sure that they knew that this should not deter them for their continued processing of what we need to do beginning on April 27th when early voting begins in Fulton County. As far as voters go, I have assured and continue to send messages out to voters that you are the keeper of your vote, you are the one protecting your vote, and that you can make sure if you have to go every day or every week to check your voter registration that you should do that, because in Fulton County, elections are secure. They are fair, they are transparent, and there has never been a finding of any fraud in a Fulton County election. So voters need to know that we are doing all of the things that we have always done for them to make sure that they will have the opportunity to feel safe and to go vote in an election that has always been secure.
Thank you very much. Next question for Mr. Risher. Now, you wrote an analysis of the warrant behind the Fulton County FBI raid. What concerns does it raise that Kurt Olson at the White House, an election denier, was named as part of the basis of this warrant?
My concerns with the affidavit that was unsealed, that was the basis for the probable cause finding for the warrant in Fulton County, my concerns were threefold. First, that it omitted important material from previous investigations into some of the allegations that are now being re-aired. Secondly, that it did no analysis of the credibility of the witnesses. And third, that it omitted a number of key witnesses who had been present during the elections and had served as third-party observers. To the second point, the credibility of some of the witnesses that were cited in the affidavit. According to the affidavit, the investigation into Fulton County was encouraged by Mr. Olson, working for the Department of Justice. And Mr. Olson, Kurt Olson, is somebody that we got to know in Arizona because he was heavily involved in the prelude and the aftermath of Kari Lake's 2022 gubernatorial bid in Arizona. As a result of his legal advice, he was sanctioned by both the Federal District Court for Arizona and by the Arizona Supreme Court for putting false statements in his filings. And I thought that information such as that spoke to his credibility as a witness, and I thought it should have been disclosed in the affidavit for the search warrant in Fulton County.
Thank you. Very, very critical for the work of this committee. Final question for now, Ambassador Eisen. We've talked a lot about some of the proposed changes for either how elections would be administered or how people can participate, vote by mail, no vote by mail, changes to voter registration requirements, et cetera. But underlying that is this discussion, debate about authority to make changes. The authorities of the president, the role of Congress, the administration authorities by the states. One of the more recent threats to justify sought-after changes by the president is a potential declaration of national emergency. Can you elaborate just for a minute or two on what a declaration of national emergency would or wouldn't do in terms of authority to impose changes?
There is no national emergency with respect to our election, Senator, as of course you know. There's been a pattern with this administration using various words in declaring national emergencies. And as has happened in hundreds of other occasions, the courts have been extraordinarily hostile to that, as they should be. We saw that come in one form when there was a supposed invasion under the Alien Enemies Act. I looked out my window. I didn't see Tren de Aragua driving tanks down Connecticut Avenue, and the Supreme Court refused to endorse that. They sent that back down to the Fifth Circuit, very conservative. Fifth Circuit extensively cited a Democracy Defenders Fund brief in saying, no, there's no emergency like that. This happened again in a different form with the National Guard, where we were very proud to represent Los Angeles among other municipalities. And the Supreme Court said, no, there's no emergency that the regular forces cannot handle. And whatever you may think of the Supreme Court's decision, I strongly disagree with some of the shadow docket decisions. Very unambiguous repudiation. And of course, tariffs. IEPA, that's another form of economic emergency. Supreme Court says it does not exist. So there is no elections emergency, nor if there were some type of an emergency, would the voter ID and other ideas that the president is unconstitutionally, unlawfully, and needlessly trying to force on us be appropriate.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Senator Welch.
I want to thank you all for the work you're doing. It's like so important, and Mr. Chairman, you're our leader here in Congress to fight back. I want to make an observation. In days not long ago, a person who so discredited himself, like Mr. Olson, would not be allowed to testify. It wouldn't be credible. So I really appreciate you staying on that. But my view, and I want your reaction, there's two lies at the heart of this effort. It's not about voter ID. Lie one is that the 2020 election is stolen. And lie two is that there's massive voter fraud. And what I understand all of you said is there's no documentation whatsoever to the assertion about voter fraud. But the lie of the election fraud continues. Today, a witness who is going to be considered for a Deputy Attorney General position would not answer the question, who won the 2020 election? So this is going to be a full-on assault that is not going to relent. And that's why I just want to express my gratitude to you for the work you're doing. It's really important. I'm going to ask you this. A national emergency sounds to me like a device by which you lose local control over your elections. How do you see a declaration of national emergency?
Well, I would first say thank you so much for that question. I would first say that they're trying to declare an emergency in our state first,
Right,
and have our state take over elections. So our state elections board does have the ability to appoint somebody in legislation in the past to appoint somebody to come and to take over elections. So that has not happened yet, but we foresee that
Right.
that is something that could happen.
Has the Director of National Intelligence ever before shown an interest in what is going on in Fulton County with ballots that were cast in 2020?
No,
Was her arrival helpful?
no.
Thank you. Ambassador and Mr. Ricker, both of you, I want to ask, on the SAVE Act, the assertion is that it's simply about voter ID. And President Trump last night made a nice line. He said that in order to get a job shoveling snow in New York City, Mandami required 2 IDs. My understanding is that the ID part of this is really incidental. IDs that would be prohibited would be such things as your military ID. Are there other aspects that are contained in the SAVE Act? And I'll start with you, Ambassador, and then go to you, Mr. Richard, that would inhibit a person from lawfully voting?
The entire SAVE Act is mischaracterized, intentionally mischaracterized as a voter ID act. It's really a voter suppression act or a voter burdening act, Senator, because every aspect of the SAVE Act, if you read through the bill, every aspect is intended to solve a non-existent problem. Demanding proof of citizenship at the polls, photo ID requirements, what counts as documentary proof, burdening online registration system, the preemption effects on our hardworking state and local elections officials who are doing such a good job, exposing them to enhanced legal liability, imposing the faulty, flawed, defective SAVE database at DHS with its false positive on top of effective functioning databases that we already have that are working in the states. And I could go on and on.
We'll let Mr. Richard go. By the way,
I'll let Mr. Richard.
you know, one of the things that's so wonderful about you being here is it's conveying that this is not a right-left deal. This is like a citizen's right. And you perceive the efforts here that the Trump administration is making as a threat to the right of a citizen to vote. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Well, I don't know that I'm as apocalyptic as Norm is, but that's usually the role that he...
That's a high bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I firmly believe that we should continue to revisit election law. As stated at the outset, I think that's best done at the states. But there's no election official in the United States who will tell you that elections are perfect or that we've reached the end of the road in terms of election administration. What I have consistently taken greater fault with is the underlying factual predicates, in that SAVE has largely been sold to the American public as necessary to stop non-citizens from participating en masse in American elections. And that's just simply not the case. I think a public policy conversation about what should be the requisite level of documentary proof for establishing citizenship is a perfectly acceptable conversation to have, but we need to be operating from the same facts. And unfortunately, the president in particular often does not start from that point.
Okay. Thank you. I want to thank all of you again. It's really important what you're doing. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for being the leader in the Senate to protect the right to vote.
So, thank you. Thank you, Senator Welch. I'm going to begin to try to bring this hearing to a close. I do have some closing remarks as I do so, but one administrative caveat. I'm told Senator Peters may be on approach. If he happens to walk in the door just under the wire, I'll give him a chance to make a statement and or ask questions of the witnesses. But short of that, let me also thank all the witnesses for your time and your participation today and your leadership and service on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. I think the perspectives and experience that you brought to this conversation today is extremely, extremely valuable. As you all witnessed, we had, I wouldn't say the good problem to have, I'd say an abundance of riches of interest from my colleagues, not just on these issues, but the concerns and the prioritization of this conversation. It's not very often that you'll get this level of attendance and participation amongst members of the Senate in a very substantive way in a forum like this. Remember, this is not a formal hearing as it should be, but in a Democratic-led forum. So for the witnesses, the audience, both in person and virtual, I think this is just a representative of how serious we are taking the threats to our democracy and our commitment to defend the right to vote and the integrity of our free and fair elections. Donald Trump supported by Republicans, will continue to try to issue illegal executive orders, ballot seizures. They've done it once. They may very well do it again. Their attempts to purge voter rolls or even declare the national emergency that we discussed, the threats are countless and must be taken seriously. But clearly we have strong leaders from a variety of backgrounds, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, a lot of independents, people who work at not just in federal government, but in state government, local government, and civil society, people working together to support what the Constitution has said so clearly in terms of who has the authority to administer elections, and what the courts have, by and large, have upheld as well. And so, as Fulton County knows all too well, we have to stand up for the right to vote, not just one time, but repeatedly throughout our history. And if we, as often as we have to, we will continue to. As California knows all too well, don't poke the bear. You know, if you're going to initiate a redistricting battle, then those pro-democracy states are not going to shy away from those fights, and we will fight fire with fire. And I think just collectively, we'll continue to stay in touch, not just to coordinate and collaborate, but to organize to defend our democracy, not just this November, but for future generations. So thank you all again for your time and participation today. With that, the Spotlight Forum is adjourned.